You know the feeling, you're closer than you've ever been. The project is almost done. The habit is almost locked in. The finish line is right there, you can practically feel it. And then quietly, without warning, you stop. Not because something went wrong, because something went right. You tell yourself you're tired, that you'll come back to it tomorrow. But tomorrow becomes a week, and the week becomes a season. And suddenly you're looking at an unfinished thing the way you look at a dusty guitar in the corner of a room with a kind of shame that doesn't have a clean name. This isn't failure in the dramatic sense. No crisis, no catastrophe, just a slow vanishing right at the edge of arrival. And the worst part, you've been here before, which means part of you already knows this isn't about discipline. This isn't about willpower. Something deeper is running. There is a structure in your brain called the Anterior Mid-Cingulate Cortex. Neuroscientists sometimes call it the seat of will. What it actually does is far more interesting. It governs your response to effortful, aversive tasks. The things that feel hard, uncertain, or threatening. And here is the uncomfortable truth. As you approach a meaningful goal, your brain doesn't just register excitement. It registers threat. Because completing something real means being judged by it. It means the dream has to leave the safety of your mind and live in the world, where the world can touch it. Your neural architecture, shaped by millions of years of survival logic, interprets that exposure as danger. And so it pulls you back, not out of laziness, out of protection. Your brain isn't broken, it's running a very old program. One that was brilliant for avoiding predators. One that is quietly catastrophic for finishing things that matter to you. The cultural script says, push through, grit your way forward, but grit, as most people use it, is a blunt instrument. It assumes that more force solves the problem, and it doesn't. You cannot outrun an operating system. You can only understand it well enough to work alongside it. Psychologists have studied what they call reward prediction error. The signal your brain fires when reality doesn't match your expectation. When you've been anticipating completion for a long time, the brain has already partially experienced the reward. The dopamine has fired prematurely. And so when the actual finish line appears, there's a strange flatness to it. The brain whispers, "Is this all?" And in that whisper, the pull to stop feels almost rational. This is why perfectionists don't finish. Not because they care too much, because the imagined version of the thing has been living rent-free in their mind for so long, the real version feels like a disappointment before it even exists. So here is what actually works. 3 protocols, not commands, but experiments you can run inside your own cognition. The first is what you might call a completion scaffold. 2 weeks before you expect to finish anything significant, you deliberately shrink the scope. Not because you're giving up, because you're retraining your brain's threat response by making done feel small and safe. The brain reason. You're overriding the exposure threat by reducing the perceived consequence of finishing. Where it fails in practice, people confuse shrinking scope with lowering standards. It's not the same. You're not reducing quality. You're reducing the symbolic weight of completion long enough to actually complete. The second protocol is environmental decoupling. You change the physical location where you do your final stretch work. A different room, a cafe, outside. The brain reason, context-dependent memory, means your avoidance patterns are literally encoded into your environment. The place where you've stalled carries the neural signature of stalling. A new space carries no such history. Where it fails, people underestimate friction and don't actually move. They stay in the same chair, open the same browser, and wonder why nothing feels different. The third is something called a public micro-commitment. You tell one person, not an audience, that you will have a specific thing done by a specific time. Not a vague intention, a concrete deliverable, the brain reason. Social consequence activates a different circuit than personal motivation. The prefrontal cortex processes social risk as more immediate than future regret. Where it fails, People announce to large audiences and create so much pressure that the threat response intensifies. One person, low stakes, high specificity. None of these protocols require you to become a different person. They require you to understand the person you already are, a system responding to invisible inputs, and adjust the inputs rather than fight the outputs. You are not someone who self-sabotages. That framing is too simple and too cruel. You are someone whose brain learned very early that being seen is dangerous, that finishing means being judged, that the unfinished thing is, at least, still yours, still perfect in its possibility. But possibility without completion is just a very elaborate form of hiding. The version of you that crosses the line doesn't do it by becoming braver. They do it by making the line feel less like a cliff and more like a threshold, something ordinary enough to simply step through. And maybe that's the whole architecture of courage, not the dramatic leap, but the quiet decision to stop mistaking the finish line for something to fear. What you've been protecting yourself from all this time was never failure. It was arrival, and arrival, it turns out, is the only thing that was ever worth the risk.